All right, so yeah, I went a little too far with the memes, but that is what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Are chariots too strong? Are they imba? P.S. I think they are on the stronger side. I don't know if they're broken yet. That's what we're going to find out today in this video. But we're going to go through some of the math. Then we're going to look at some editor testing between different types of units and see the differences there. And then finally, we're going to end it with what started it all, which is the match between Kavoth and Rapple. That's what started all this controversy. Rapple said he absolutely lost because of chariot archers, and we're going to see if that's really the case. So let's just get started with the Excel spreadsheet. So here on the left-hand side, you can see the three units that, in my opinion, compete with one another in terms of supremacy or dominance, right? You see that all these numbers here are heavy stats. I put them all as heavy. I didn't put them as medium or regular, because that's when archers truly shine. When they start getting their heavy upgrades, their ballistics, and you start making a lot of them, that's when the archers become a problem. Early on to I would say mid game, they're not really that influential, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit as well. But realistically, so these are for heavy units, and they're fully upgraded with bronze. You can see that the Toxicity high, rather, don't look at the DPS, look at the DPS per cost and the DPS per pop. The DPS per cost, it's staggeringly in favor of the Toxicity, which is expected because the Toxicity has 15 range. The Arcus, on the other hand, has 20 range, and it has lower DPS by about 15% or so than the Toxicity. This is the part where maybe it's a little bit skewed. The Chariot Archer is actually at the same exact DPS per cost as the Arcus itself. So that part, maybe it's a little bit kind of blurred a little bit. Maybe the Arcus should get a little bit more, maybe the Chariot Archer should get a little bit less, because this unit, the Chariot Archer, is also provided with 5 speed. So it has utility, whereas the Arcus doesn't. So it's clearly a better unit than the Arcus. However, on the other side of the spectrum, the Arcus can be produced from multiple Raxes, whereas the Chariot Archer, you need a special Migdal to produce him. You need 400 gold and 10 favor just to produce this unit. In terms of its actual training time, it's 16 seconds for an Arcus, but it's 10 seconds for a Chariot. However, I still think it's much easier to mass Arcus than it is to mass Chariots in the general scheme of things, right? So they both have their pros and cons. I would say I would definitely give the edge to the Chariot Archer in this sense. The Chariot Archer is, in my opinion, hands down better than the Arcus. Now, the Toxicity and the Chariot Archer, that's a little bit closer of a comparison, because while the Chariot has lower DPS per cost and per pop than the Toxicity, it has a little bit more speed and it has a lot more range, right? So 15% DPS for a little bit more speed, I think anyone would take that, right? But here's where the Toxicity kind of catches up. The Toxicity gets access to a lot better unique text than the Chariot Archer does. The Toxicity, you can get the Ares upgrade, you can get Apollo to buff its attack as well. You can get so many different upgrades to actually buff the Toxicity, especially the Artemis upgrade. Whereas the Chariot Archer, you really have only Sekhmet, which gives it a little bit more range. So I definitely give overall late game composition or late game prowess to the Toxicity. I give second place to the Chariot Archer, and I'll give third place to the Arcus. So that's my ranking in terms of just looking at the stats alone. In terms of actual HP per cost and whatnot, you can see they're all somewhat the same, right? The Toxicity has better Pierce HP. Um, I would say it's roughly give or take. It's not really a big difference here. The main thing actually is this is the Chariot Archer of Set and Isis. The Chariot Archer of Ra is a different specimen altogether. It's going to get extra HP, right? So that's a little bit different. We're going to look at that as well. But the Raw Chariot Archer, I would say, is a lot better than the Chariot Archer here, and it's probably on even footing with the Toxicity right here, especially if you go for Segment. All right, so before we get started into the editor test and the game review, let's just talk about why archer units get better as the game progresses while melee units get worse. If you're a raiding cavalry, let's see if I can draw something here. All right, this is a raiding cavalry. There's a guy, there's some dude just running on it, okay? This guy, in order for him to be effective, he needs to attack this guy and he has to close the gap. He can't attack from here. He has to run forward, attack the archer, and they need to close up and start fighting. Whereas if you have a large army of these dudes right here, you're not gonna be able to utilize all of them at the exact same time because at best you're gonna get a surround, right? But if you have such a large army, there's gonna be cavalry here, 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 waiting for their turn to fight because they cannot close the gap while their teammates are fighting in the battle, right? So that's why it's ineffective as a melee unit because you have to wait your turn in order to do damage. That's why archers get better because firstly, there's two things. All of these archers in the middle are going to be doing damage outward, right? To every unit here. They don't have to wait their turn. They're just firing away. So they're going to be getting 100% of their DPS off. Whereas melee units are probably going to get less than 50% of their DPS off. That's the first thing. The second thing is that all of these archers in the middle right here are completely safe. They cannot be attacked, right? Which is kind of similar to the point I made earlier. But the fact that these guys cannot be attacked, only the people around them can be attacked, means you can take advantage of archer balls even better because if you put a tanky unit in front of it, let's say you put a rock giant, a hoplite, if you put some spearmen are not tanky, but you know they do their job. If you put any of these units and you protect these archers with a nice little barrage, right? Then now they're even safer. They're going to be defended while they're going to be dishing out 100% of the DPS. So I hope that makes sense. And the sense basically is the larger the armies get, the better archers become. The smaller the armies are, the better melee units are. That's generally the scope of things. All right, so I don't even want to do this test, but I just want to kind of show the Twitch community who said raiding cavalry are losing to chariot archers. There's no scenario which chariot archers beat raiding cavalry. It's on similar costs, okay? Like let's say the chariot archers cost 2,000 resources. If you have 1,500 worth of raiding cavalry and they're similarly upgraded, there's no chance you lose, okay? Even if you have like 1,200 resources of raiding cavalry, you're still going to win that fight. Here, you're going to see, like, this is all equal cost. And I think, personally, I don't even think you lose a single or one or two cavalry units in this, okay? Like most, it's going to be a bloodbath all three ways, right? So you're going to see. This one started with 15 and one raiding cavalry unit lost, okay? Equal cost. Here, 4 raiding cavalry units, I think, died. Here, 8 cavalry units died. So across the board, even if our armies get large, chariot archers by themselves are not going to be beating raiding cavalry. And yeah, I know that's probably obvious to everyone, but yeah, I just had to show that. So I know what you're thinking. You're probably saying, obviously the raiding cavalry are going to win on an open field. No shit, right? So what about here in this little choke point? In this choke point, there's only one opening which you can enter from here, which is a worst case scenario for a raiding cavalry. I would never take this fight in a game. But you can see that there's 30 chariot archers here, 32 raiding cavalry. The chariot archers cost about 1,400 resources more, and they're worth about 25 to 30 pop more. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now, but you're going to see, even in a scenario as dire as this, the raiding cavalry will still win. And they don't win by a small margin. They win by a larger margin here. So I'll just watch. And this is also what I was talking about earlier. You see how the units in the back are not even doing any damage? Whereas all of the chariot archers are doing damage at the exact same time. So that's why range units, as the numbers get larger and larger, it becomes more and more favorable to them. So you can see that the battle is almost over. We started with 32 raiding cavalry, and we ended with almost around half of them survived. So even in a really difficult scenario like this, you still win. Now the question is, okay, yeah, you win in that scenario, but what about chariot archers that are hitting and running, right? Hitting and running. How does that do versus raiding cavalry? So we can try that as well. It's a little bit harder to do because I'm doing it by myself here in the editor, but it doesn't work that effectively versus cavalry. You're going to see they can easily close the gap, and they're probably doing less DPS as a result. So I think this is even worse for the chariot archer versus cavalry units in general. Now, things are different. If the units are slower, like a Huskarl or a Berserker or something along those lines, then yeah, you can definitely hit and run, right? But versus fast units like a raiding cavalry, you can't do so. All right, guys, so I don't want you guys to draw the wrong conclusions. I'm not saying chariot archers are too weak. I'm not saying raiding cavalry are too strong. In my personal opinion, I think raiding cavalry and chariot archers are in a good position right now. I don't think chariot archers are broken. I think they're extremely strong. But when you look at units that are broken, the way that I see it is units that have no counterplay. I think the mummy is on the cusp of being broken because the mummy has very, very little counterplay. And the reason why I say that is because the mummy, you do your special and you can run back, and it's very hard to actually kill the mummy. And if you don't kill the mummy, then you're not going to be able to win almost any fight. So I think that's almost borderline OP. The chariot archer, there's tons of options to actually counter this unit. Norse have it the hardest. I'm not disagreeing with that. I do think Huskarls need a little bit of a buff, or they need a little bit of a change where you can mass them. But I don't think the unit itself, the chariot archer, is OP. I do think that its DPS is on the higher side because it's competing directly with the Arcus. The Arcus is slightly better, but I think it's competing with the Arcus. So maybe in the DPS category, it's a little bit stronger. Maybe the raw chariot might be entirely broken, especially with Sekhmet. I'm not 100% sure at the moment, but from my games, from my gameplay, I don't really think they're really broken at the moment. They're very strong, but there's a lot of very strong things in the game. Cantarius are very strong. Athena hoplites are very strong. Mummies are very strong. There's a ton of strong things in the game, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. We want to have a lot of strong, really strong units and really strong compositions because it's fun getting to that point and enjoying these units and having fun with them, right? But I don't think you need to nerf everything that's too strong. I think you need to nerf everything that's broken per se, but not everything that's too strong. Anyways, there's a lot that I can discuss, but let's just jump into this game. This is a game that Kavoth is playing set. He's going for a Wadjet spear push, and it looks like Rapple is just doing the standard gameplay, which he's going for Herser and throwing Axeman. He has a pretty decent map overall, I would say. He has a little bit of a tough situation with the gold mines, I think, but let's see how this plays out. It's a very fearsome army by Kavoth. This one might be tough, actually. Kavoth has 60 units versus 46, so let's slow it down now. One thing that Rapple has is he has really good micro. I've seen a lot of players play this game, and I think Rapple has some of the best micro in the game. He's always hitting the right units, okay? So now, let's slow this down. I just want to see what happens here. The Wadjet are attacking the Valks, which is okay. Okay, but... Alright. Yeah, that's good. That's good. See, the problem with what Kavoth did here is he didn't have any axemen in his composition. He had like 2 guys here, but overall there's mostly spears. This is why Rapple even stood a chance here, because the Herser just jumped right onto the Wadjets, and there was no axemen to actually counter them. If he had a few axemen, the Herser could never move forward like this. There's a lot of priests too. I think this is it went a little too heavy on the priests here. Maybe like 2 or 3 would have been fine. Because the Wadjets are the main DPS unit, right? They can deal with myth units fine. Kavoth is doing the right thing where he's hitting the backline one shot with the Wadjets and moving on to the next unit. But these Herser, in my opinion, are what won the fight for Rapple. He shouldn't have won this fight. He only won because Kavoth didn't make Axeman here. So now Rapple is in an excellent position. So the main takeaways from that is, in my opinion, just make a few Axemen and keep them safe. Don't lose them, right? And now he lost all his priests, so he has to waste his pharaohs in power just to get the Wadjets back up to full HP, which is fine. It's not a big deal. Okay, so I would say that overall, it's still a pretty even game, but I would give a little slight edge to Rapple because he stopped the push initially, and he also made Kavoth waste his god power. So Rapple is now going up with Skadi. Alternatively, let me think about it. Like, if I was in Rapple's position, would I do this as well? And I think this is probably the right play, because it's really hard to actually fight this army in Age 2. Very, very difficult. It's a really nice little wall that he set up here as well. And the fact that he went to Age 3 and now he has access to freezing up his opponent's army. So he's definitely going to need that in order to secure this gold mine. So I really like the way Rapple is playing this overall. I think he has very strong early game. Okay, so now it's going to get a little bit dicey. I think he's going to have to Well, he has a pretty decent army, but let's look at Kavot's army. Kavot has... Now he has Axemen, so I don't really know how... I think he can actually probably win this fight, probably. But he looks like he's backing off. Probably backing off because he doesn't want to get surrounded. He doesn't want to get frozen and then just jumped on. Also, when you have this many Wadgets, it becomes a little bit of an issue as well, because now the Wadgets, if you control group all these Wadgets to one control group, you're gonna start overkilling units. Like, it's gonna be good on the Frost Giant, you're gonna be able to delete them instantly, but on smaller HP units, it's gonna be somewhat of a waste. I really like this rotation from Rapple, but he might run into some trouble here because his army might get surrounded. But at the same time, he has Scotty, so he knows that he can get out of trouble. He has a get out of jail card, right? So this is going to be interesting. Let's zoom in a little bit. And let's slow this down. I think the Wadget should probably hit the Frost Giants here, which they're doing now, but I think it's too late. No, I think it should be okay. No, it's too late now. I also think that you might want to have to actually make some slingers here too, because Rapple's going for almost a purely throwing Axeman play right now. Well, just almost entirely throwing Axeman, so maybe it would have been best to add some slingers here. Axeman slinger. I don't think spears were needed at all because Rapple did not make any cavalry. So that was a little bit of a composition mismatch, which is hard to know in the moment, right? So it's difficult for all of us. So now, overwhelmingly in the favor of Rapple. What would I do in this situation? I think I would take a TC as well. It's hard to push into this, but at the same time, like, if Rapple only knew how far ahead he was right now in military, he would be able to actually attack this and win. So the only issue is he has mostly infantry, so he doesn't have any like cavalry units to actually soak up some of the pierce damage from this Migdol and from the chariots that are coming out. But I would personally, taking this TC is fine, but after this you really want to pump out a ton of units, I would say, especially just transition into raiding cavalry. You want to make stuff happen at this point of the game, so you can go for 3 TCs as well, but in my opinion, I think a strong push here would probably end the game. Nice micro by Kavoth coming forward. Nice hill fort to zone out the chariots as well. But this is where I'm pretty certain that this is the point where you need to start throwing down a lot of production buildings and start just pumping out a ton of units to actually attack this force. This is a nice little push right here, nice raid. Right, so that's pretty good, but I also think like this is a mistake in my opinion, because he took the bulk of his force, which is a very slow moving force, right, 4 speed, to kind of take out this gold mine. Now, you can do it with a much smaller group of units. You don't need to have all these units just move out here. The fact that he moved out here made this position very safe. So now Rapple is no longer worried about being pushed in here. I personally think he needed to start getting ready for a massive push. He actually has a pretty decent economy behind this too, but overall these are not like terrible choices. I still think these are reasonable choices. Perhaps I would have done the same. I don't think this is a good choice though, because it's too slow of an army, and then also like he killed 1 vill there, 2 vills there, 3 vills. I don't really like it still, even though he killed the 3 vills. Because now even the chariots are gonna have a field day on this, right? They're gonna hit and run. If Kavoth is watching, yeah, he's gonna lose a lot of units as well, right? And lose a lot of HP on his units. And Kavoth is almost there to Thoth, so I think like somewhat like you have to be like Rapple's on a little bit of a timing window here, so he needs to be very careful. He can't just like take it this slow. He has to actually gear up and start pushing at some point. He had a massive military lead too, right? So this is also an option as well, but he should have done this much sooner, I think. If he wasn't going to push, he should have just instantly grabbed that second TC. So now, like, the issue became that Kavoth was able to tech to Mythic unimpeded. It was free, practically, right? And Mythic is a massive power spike for Set and Isis. Once they get Valley of the Kings, he's going to be able to take an economic lead almost, or an economic equilibrium once he gets Valley of the Kings, because Valley of the Kings, which allows you to double produce with your Pharaoh empowering it, is almost equivalent to 800 to 1,000 resources, depending on whether or not you have Levy and other upgrades as well. So he's just, now he's on a little bit of a timer, right? Because Kavoth is going to be able to push in with Meteorite and just start killing stuff left and right. I also think still, it doesn't look like Rapple's making the right units here. He should be making raiding cavalry, which he's starting to do now, but he should have had a lot more at this position right now. This meteor, I saw it live on stream as well. This was an absolutely massive meteorite. Killed a lot of vills, killed out the production. Pretty strong meteorite here. So even before like anything happens, right now, the Chariot Archer wasn't able to push its weight on anything. It got a couple free units, but it wasn't the distinguishing factor in any point of this game so far, right? Kavoth made a lot of mistakes. He lost his army twice, true, but at the same time, Rapple didn't capitalize on Kavoth's mistakes at any point. I mean, he did do a couple things here and there, but overall, it just seemed like he was lost a little bit after what to do after he won the fights. Now look at Rapple's economy as well. He has 43 on wood, right? So I'm not sure what's going on there, but 43 on wood, 6 on food. So he's already in a macro conundrum, and I don't think this is a good fight to take either. Like, this is a terrible army overall. He has throwing axemen, right? Which are going to get chewed up by these chariot archers. And now there's ancestors going on as well. Like here, this is a very tight fight. You can see that he's completely outnumbered. Well, he's outnumbered to a pretty decent degree, right? 15 units. On top of that, there's champion units. And these units are throwing axemen, which I don't think are going to do that well in this fight. There's not enough raiding cavalry. If half of these throwing axemen were raiding cavalry, it would have done a lot better. But then obviously Ancestors with already a military lead is going to clean this up. So now, in my opinion, this game is close to being over, right? Rapple has an economic lead, but there's a massive military lead by Kavoth, and he's in Mythic with champion units. And look, Rapple did not even get his Pierce armor here too, which is insane. You should definitely have Pierce armor at this point in the game. Nice raids by Kavoth, taking the TC. Now remember, like, he's double producing units off this Migdal, so even though Rapple has more villagers, I would say that Kavoth is probably have similar or better eco at this point too. So at this point, has Chariots been the distinguishing factor? Has Chariots allowed him to win this game? I still don't think so. I think if these Chariots were camels instead of Chariots, it would have been the same result. Now, the one benefit that Chariots have is they cost wood, right? Wood and gold, whereas they don't cost any food like the camel does. But regardless, if these Chariot Archers were replaced with almost any other unit, even Spearmen, I think Rapple would have still lost that fight. But I guess the Chariot Archers, in the sense, it's easier to pump out Chariots than it is to pump out any other unit. But it's not that the unit was too strong, right? It's just the fact that Kavoth had a lot more of them. And then also, Rapple had a lot of throwing axemen, which I don't think really helped that much. At this point, I think this is a mistake by Kavoth as well. It might work out, but ultimately you got to be very careful with these type of pushes, right? I think he probably overestimates his position, or he probably thinks he's okay, but you can sometimes just lose a game outright with pushes like this. You have to be very careful. But it might work. Let's have a look. I didn't actually watch this game fully out. I watched bits and pieces of it on stream. Looks like it's doing pretty well though, because Rapple has very small army overall. Now remember, this is 17 chariots fighting 3, 5, 7 raiding cavalry. So of course, I would say the chariots are going to win, right? Not to mention, these are heavy raiding cavalry without the Pierce Armor upgrade versus Champion Chariots. So, yes, you should lose that fight. There's no doubt about that. Okay, so this is a push right here. Once again, this army is pure Chariots, but there's not that much anti-chariot units in here. There's not that much raiding cav, right? It's mostly throwing axemen, a few Huskarls that are probably already cleaned up, and a Frost Giant. Like it's not really that much to actually deal with it. Overall, I think it's still going well because Kavath is fighting near the production facilities of Rapple. That's why I said you have to be very careful with these type of pushes. You don't, when you're pushing your opponent, you want to make sure that you actually have a good production line or a supply line, right? The supply line is here to here. Whereas for Rapple, it's here to here, here to here, here to here. It's like very tough to push into that. The better way to go about it is probably push from here. If he pushes from here, then he actually has a fallback point, which is town center. I still think that's a little bit tricky, but if you push from here, you put your catapult here and you keep your chariots here, in case you start losing the battle, then you can just retreat back to closer to your supply line so you can get reinforcements from there. You can also put some nice walls up here to reduce the surface area. Fighting here is an is a terrible decision overall. So now I think Rapple, it's kind of found his way back into the game. If you look at the military count, Kavath had a commanding lead. He had a significant increase in army, right? But now it's kind of equalized, and villagers are in Kavath's favor. So I'll say it kind of switched on its heels, right? Like economy is in Kavath's favor, and military is in Rapple's favor. So Rapple's producing entirely raiding cav, which is very good. But he needs to get both his Pierce Armor upgrades, which he still doesn't have. So he definitely needs Pierce Armor ASAP. Remember, this is 15 raiding cav versus 22 chariots. Okay, so he didn't take that fight. Now Kavath, Rapple's in a very tough situation at this point now, because Kavath has really pushed his weight around with his bigger army. But I think Rapple can still win this if he can just kind of stabilize a little bit. Military-wise, Rapple has a pretty equal position here. And I think this army will absolutely decimate this army right here, right? So this is the kind of army you probably want to deal with Chariot Archers. He has Valkyries, he has Huskarls, and he has a lot of RC. Even this army, I think, well, this one is a little bit tougher because there's a lot more chariots in the mix, but let's have a look and see here. It's a good little catch right here. Even the raiding cavalry here will still win against the chariots. These chariots are champion, by the way, but they're losing on both sides. So now Rapple, he's bought his way back into the game. I think he has a chance here. Let's see what happens. This TC I would probably give up at this point. It's going to be very hard to defend both spots. Nice little cleanup there. And he lost there, so... Now the one thing I can say is it's kind of... it might be a little bit irritating because Kavath is only pushing with one single unit, which is just a Chariot Archer his entire game long. So I can see that being a little bit frustrating because he didn't make a single other unit besides Chariot Archers, so that kind of does suck. And this is the best civ to do it against, which is Norse, which they struggle the most versus this. But you have to remember that one player is in the Mythic Age, the other is in Age 3. And on top of that, he still didn't get his second Pierce Armor upgrade too, so he's going to struggle a little bit too at that point. But now is just a side, like Kavath just has a much bigger army. And that's because Valley of the Kings has just been pumping away non-stop units all game long. do I still think at this point that Chariot Archers are what lost Rapple this game? Now this is a fight you don't want to take. You can clearly see that there's 18 raiding cavalry, some Huskarls and a couple other units, or maybe a few more units than that, versus 43 or more Chariot Archers, right? So that's over 100, it's almost 130 pop right here versus 50, 60 pop, I would say, at best. So you have double the population in Chariot Archers, and you have champion Chariot Archers here versus heavy, right? So there's no way you're going to win, and you're fighting in a choke point. So you can't win this. That's why I said you probably want to give up this TC, because the terrain doesn't favor defense, right? It's very easy to actually push this TC. You probably wanted to give this up, stop wasting your army, and then just take this TC and just fall back from there. Now the thing is, he probably wants to defend these gold mines, but ultimately he's losing a lot more resources than he's gaining, right? Because he's going to keep on losing his army, especially in a position like this. Even despite that, he still did pretty well, but like champion units, and he has almost 60, 70 pop more than you in this army right here. Yeah, so honestly, like, let's just fast forward this game now. It's gone on for too long, but this game is over. I don't think this game was dictated by Chariot Archers. I don't think Chariot Archers are OP, and that's what cost Rapple this game. I played a similar game, and you guys can find it on my channel. Me and Pegasus played this Thor versus Isis, right? And I was down 4-2 TCs, and Pegasus made non-stop Chariot Archers. And as a Norse player, I still was able to do well. So, and I won that game. I don't think Rapple lost because of Chariot Archers. I think there was subpar decision making that went on in this game. To say that you lost because of Chariot Archers, I think is a little bit disingenuous. I think the bigger factor here, the biggest reason he lost, I'm just gonna let it play, is because he didn't take advantage of his win. He had a military advantage here, but instead he kind of wasted a lot of his time raiding this with some throwing axemen and frost giants instead of pushing this position right here. If you have a military advantage, let's say you win a fight, there's usually 2 or 3 options you can do. The first option and the best option is to push your weight onto your opponent. If you know that you can kill him outright, then you want to do so. Now, Rapple couldn't have killed him outright because his army consisted probably of mostly throwing axemen, some fire giants. He wanted to make the transition from those units into raiding cavalry ASAP, right? And then taking the TC is okay, but the main thing is you want to push this position. So him walking from here all the way here to get a raid off on like 2 or 3 villagers bought Kavo so much time to get to Mythic Age, Valley of the Kings, and hit a power spike that Set and Isis have. And that's what ultimately cost Rapple the game. Now, I will admit that this matchup is a lot harder for the Norse player than the Egyptian player. I think Egypt does a lot better here. So, no doubt, like he's playing an uphill battle, right? Most of the game long. So that is true, but I don't think that Rapple lost because his opponent made Chariot Archers. I think Rapple lost because what I just mentioned, decision making, and his macro was actually not that good. He also didn't get his 2 armory upgrades for Pierce Armor for the longest time, like almost 25 minutes into the game. So all of those things combined is what caused Rapple to lose. I really think his macro was actually not that good in this game either. So bad decision making, macro was a little bit loose as well, and then ultimately Kavo was able to capitalize with his timing push with the Chariot Archers. So anyways, my final opinion, I don't think Chariot Archers are broken. I think they're very strong. I think there's a lot of very strong things in the game. I think it's okay to have very strong things in the game. And as long as there's counterplay, they shouldn't be completely nerfed to the ground, right? There's like God Power, like Implode doesn't have that much counterplay. You cast Implode, your units can't even garrison. That's the problem. So stuff like that, where there's no counterplay, I think that needs to be changed. But when there's counterplay, like Chariot Archers, yes, they're going to be better and better as the game goes on. Mass Chariot Archers are going to be a problem, especially for Norse. And I think something needs to be done there. I think Huskarls need a little bit of a change. But I don't think that this unit is broken by any stretch of the imagination. All right, guys, that was a long one. Thank you for watching.